Generational wealth. If you are somebody who is interested in building generational wealth, this episode will be the single best episode that you've ever heard. Why? I'm somebody who spent my entire career working with family offices, centimillionaires, which are people that are worth $100 million plus, billionaires. And when you think about it, there's not a lot of those people in the world. Centimillionaires, 100 million plus, there's only 30,000. When you think about billionaires, that number drops down to 3,000. And when you want to think about the elite of the elite, the Musks, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, the people that are worth $100 billion plus, there's only 18 of those in the world. But I'm someone who's here to tell you, and it took me a while to get this because I'm someone who they came to manage their money, not make their money. So it took me a while to see, well, actually, what did they do to make the money? And whether it's Zuckerberg or Musk or my clients that were billionaires or centimillionaires, they all did the exact same thing. And if you're someone who's interested in building that generational wealth, in today's episode, I'm going to lay out step by step what they did and exactly what you need to do to build generational wealth. Welcome to the American Capitalist Show. This episode I am super excited about because the truth is generational wealth, I think, is something obtainable for anybody. The challenge is you need to get the information sooner than later, and it took me a long time. I was really 40 years old before I got it. I'm hoping some of you out there are a little bit younger, or you have children, grandchildren, someone else that you can share this knowledge and information with. Because what you're going to find out is it's really not as difficult as what you've been told, but it is exactly something that's entirely different from what you've been told. And we're going to lay that out step by step today. Now, in episode 1, and I encourage you, if you haven't watched that, it's a great foundation. Go back and take a look at that episode. I showed you how anybody, even if you're making $100 grand a year, can get to somewhere between $3 to $10 million relatively easy by doing some simple things. Making sure you're not overspending, making sure you're not taking on debt, making sure you're investing in the right accounts, in the right investments, and that over time can pretty easily get you to $3 to $10 million. And I'm not here to say that 10 million or 3 million isn't significant, because it is, but it's not generational wealth. And let's think about that. If you've got 10 million bucks, after taxes, what that's going to distribute to you from your portfolio is somewhere around $300,000 to $350,000 a year. Now, that's a lot of money, but it's not money that's going to compound to hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you live in a state like California or New York, you know to have a decent home, drive a new car, $350,000 is just going to get you by. And this episode today is not about just getting by. It's about shattering that glass ceiling. It's about changing your mental mindset. And it's about showing you the exact roadmap that I have seen, that I have helped with, and that I can validate has actually turned people from being worth hundreds of thousands to hundreds of millions of dollars. Let's first start with the definition of generational wealth. What is it? What does it mean? Who has it? Who doesn't have it? What are you trying to accomplish with it? How much money is generational wealth? Is it 11 million, 12 million, 50 million, 100 million? I'm going to break that down step by step for you right now. So look, generational wealth, what that means is it's wealth that can transfer to the next generation. And when you think about people like the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, people that were worth billions and billions of dollars, that did not come within one generation. And so the goal is here, if you can get started in your generation and reasonably pass that on to an educated family to carry that on, you are giving the next generation a leg up, a big opportunity to do some of the things that you didn't do. However, I also do believe that if you get this information soon enough, early enough, and I'm going to show you in this episode, you can actually build generational wealth in just one generation. It's a bit arbitrary, but what I'm going to use is a number of $20 million is where generational wealth pretty much starts. And at the firm that I sold, where I worked with family offices, people that were worth hundreds of millions of dollars, we considered generational wealth to be 25 million. So right around that 20 million number. Why is that? Well, if you have a $20 million lump sum of money that you obviously invest in a portfolio, that's going to kick off somewhere around $1 million in passive income. That passive income is going to be enough. $1 million is a pretty good lifestyle to have the rest reinvested, in that $20 million over time. By the time you pass that to the next generation, could be worth $30 to $40 million. So that, in my definition, is the goal of generational wealth. Now, when you start upping that to 50 million, 100 million, hundreds of million, billions of dollars, obviously that legacy, that impact is much larger. But what I want to do today is show you exactly how you get there. What I'm going to do is share with you 3 stories. Now, these aren't just stories though. These are actual people, clients. I'm going to change the name and change some information. None of the numbers though, of what they actually did to build generational wealth, and why I think most people, myself included, learn the best from stories. My stories was watching exactly what they did. And I told you earlier, it took me a long time to figure this out, because as a money manager, people didn't hire me to create the wealth for them. That's the truth. They hired me to protect the wealth. They hired me to minimize taxes. They hired me to grow the wealth. So my education, my knowledge, just like many of the other top wealth advisors in the world, was not about creating wealth. It was about building, protecting, and growing it. And so for me, it took me a long time to realize, well, Rob, that's great. But for yourself, for other clients, for your family, if they don't come to you with 25 million bucks, what are they going to do? And so I don't know why it took me this long, but it finally clicked at about 39 years of age. All of them did one thing to build that wealth. And what I started to understand and realize is, the sooner you realize what they did, the bigger that impact is going to be. And we talked about in the last episode, the power of compounding. When you start putting money away in your 20s, by the time you're 60, it's way more impactful. It's a much larger amount than when you do that starting in your 40s or 50s. So today, what I'm going to do is share with you these 2 stories. And I'm also going to lay out a roadmap of 2 simple ways that you can actually build this generation yourself. First of all, before I start telling you the story of Manny, Mo, and Jack, before I give you the roadmap, I told you that there is one thing, whether it's Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, the centimillionaires we discussed, the billionaires that I worked with, there's one thing that they all did. What do you think it is? They built equity. They built businesses. Every single one of them. Zuckerberg, Facebook, Bezos, Amazon, Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, my clients, pest control companies, construction companies, pallet companies, healthcare companies. They all built equity. And when I get into these 3 stories, they all built it differently. They all obtained it differently, but none of them, and I'll just be honest, nobody I have ever worked with, the hundreds of people that were multi-millionaires, ever did it without equity. Well, that's not entirely true. There's athletes I worked with that signed $100 million contracts, and those people, but I'm going to guess that most of you are not professional athletes. Most of you are not movie stars. Most of you are regular people, and most of you want a real world plan of how do you build generational wealth for your family. And the cool thing about this is the 3 people that I'm going to tell you about, very ordinary people. Nothing really special about them, but they got the lesson, they got it early, they got the right information, and they built generational wealth for themselves. So you ready? Okay, let's get started. The first story, guys, I'm going to tell you about is a guy named Manny. And if you've got kids, grandkids, or young yourself, this is probably going to be the single most impactful story that you're going to hear today. And so let me tell you a little bit about Manny. Well, those of you guys know me, I'm a huge Disney fan. I've got something called a Club 33 membership, which is a private membership. The coolest part about it is they give you a tour guide. The tour guide gets you through line so you don't have to wait. You get on rides and all that stuff. And the tour guides you spend 8-9 hours with, you start to build relationships with them. And with Manny, I built a pretty good relationship over 5 years. He was a young kid, early, I think 19, 20 when we started. And he was super inquisitive. He knew what I did, was always asking me about the stock market. He was asking me about business advice. And he went to school, USC. Hey, I'm a Bruin. I don't necessarily love that part, but he got a marketing degree from USC. And what he was wondering is, okay, Rob, I'm going to be finishing college in another year. What should I do? So we had some conversations. What he really wanted to do was he wanted to go and work for ESPN. ESPN's a Disney company. And you could think most guys his age love sports, pretty cool job. But what I said to him is, man, we got to think about this. Most of the compensation you're going to get from this company is not going to be from salary. It's going to be from stock options if you get into the C-suite. And is Disney really the stock that you want to tie your fortunes to? I don't think so. Look, Disney's a great company. I love Disney, but the best days of Disney are behind it. And when you think about becoming an executive at a company, when you talk about someone like Warren Buffett, he always jokes around and says, I pay less in taxes than my secretary does. A lot of people don't understand that. What does he mean by that? Well, what he means is when you get paid a salary, what's called ordinary income, you could pay as much as 38, 40% more with state taxes added to that on that money. But when you get capital gains, meaning equity, stock, that is capped out at 20%. So not only are you going to get more money through accumulation of stock, you're going to pay less in taxes. We all know that Warren Buffett is making more than what his secretary is. Okay, so what I told him is, let's think about this. What are the types of companies that you can get into that are going to give you the biggest opportunity, the most bang for your buck? And while you're young, let's take the most risk. And so what we narrowed it down was we looked at pre-IPO companies that were technology companies, which is where the future is, but they didn't yet trade publicly. Why? Because what these pre-IPO companies are doing early stage is they're trying to incentivize and pay their people with more stock because it's cheaper because they don't have a lot of cash flow. And what we decided on and where he got a job was at a company called CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike, if you've been watching the stock today, it's publicly traded, has been an absolute moonshot. If you look at the stock the day it went public, IPO'd, skyrocketed. Well, for 3 years, almost 4 years, he was able to accumulate a lot of stock. The day that stock went public, Manny became a multi-millionaire. That stock, he turned into cash for $6 million at the age of 27. This is why it is so important, guys, to give your kids the right advice when they're going and looking for a career, understanding that opportunity is much more than what that salary is. And so how is that $6 million turned into generational wealth for Manny? Well, he's 27 years of age. If he just puts that $6 million away, remember, he's still making a great salary. He's still getting more stock. He's got a 401k. If he just puts that away and he invests just $1,000 a month for 30 years, and he's 27, so by the time he's 57, you know how much he's going to be worth? $106 million. That is generational wealth. Had he have taken that job at ESPN Disney, maybe he could have got to $5 to $6 million, maybe. This is the difference of one decision. This is the difference of knowledge, education, information, and understanding the path to generational wealth. And I told you, equity, the 25 years that I've been around, is the only way to get there. This Manny story is one way that anybody can do it. For those of you who are maybe a little bit older, maybe you're already in corporate America, I'm going to tell you the story about Mo. And so unlike Manny, who got into a startup early on, he did get into a good company. He worked actually for a company called IBM. Most of you knew. Now, IBM, while it's done good over time, didn't do amazing. And while Manny made some really good money up until his early 40s, from the time he worked there when he was 20, he accumulated a few $1 million. Definitely good. But where did Mo put himself on the path to get generational wealth? Mo was a client of mine. We were working together, and we started to talk about this next leg in his career because he'd been at IBM for a long period of time. He had kind of capped out there. He was in the C-suite. He was on his way to that $10 to $15 million mark, but it wasn't the generational wealth. It wasn't the opportunity he was looking for. And so what we started doing, and some of you that might be mid-stage, mid-career probably want to consider, is we started looking at how do we take this knowledge and information of being at a big company like IBM, being in the C-suite, and take that pedigree and transfer it to somewhere where we can actually leverage that. And so going back to thinking about this pre-IPO stage, you probably have heard the term private equity, right? Well, what does private equity mean? It just means private businesses, businesses that are not yet traded publicly. So IBM, Coca-Cola, Apple, all public companies. Any company that's not traded is going to be a private equity company. And there's big companies out there that are called private equity companies. And what they're trying to do is buy young companies, put management in place, build them up, build the earnings up, and take that investment that they made at an early stage, then eventually either sell it to another private equity company for a big gain, or a lot of times take that public. And so when you found a young company, usually it's startup founders that don't have publicly traded expertise. And so what all these private equity companies are looking for is people just like Mo, people who have a pedigree, people that were trained at big organizations, and they want them to come in and help these young companies get to the next stage. So it was really tough. It was like pulling teeth with Mo to get him out of IBM. He felt super comfortable. He was risk averse, but we got him into the private equity world. He got into a young company called Nutanix. He got in their early stage. And what happened over a period of time was, again, he got some of those shares that were private shares. Well, those shares went public. And what I can tell you is the first number that he got was about 4 times what he made over his entire career over that 17-year period. The cool thing about it is, after he exited there with millions and millions of dollars, over the next 10 years, he did it 2 more times, each time with a private equity company, doubling and then tripling his net worth to almost $100 million by the time he was 56 years of age. So even if you don't start out at the beginning with the right company, some of those are you that are mid-stage, some of you that have the opportunity to go and work for a private equity company, again, how did he do it? Equity, having a path, having value, and understanding that that equity was going to be the most important part of accumulating his generational wealth. The last story of the 3 I'm going to tell you is about a guy named Jack. And for me, Jack, I'm most passionate about. I'm Jack. The people I work with primarily are Jack. And I think that anybody could be Jack. So we talked about Manny and Mo, and Manny got into the right company at the right time and got stock incentives and became someone who's definitely going to be a person who has generational wealth. We talked about Mo, how he learned the same lesson just a little bit later, but how he was able to get magnitudes of what he made in 15 years and 24 to 36 months. And he did that 2 additional times, put himself on the path to generational wealth. But for the rest of us, people, if you're like me, I love control. I talked about in the first episode about owning your own home and all the things that come with that. I love owning your income. I love owning your own business and giving yourself the opportunity, betting on yourself to do great things. And in this case, betting on yourself to create generational wealth. And so when I met Jack, we actually did our MBAs together. He had a business that he started up. It was a healthcare business. It was doing pretty well. When he came to me, when we were graduating school, he asked me to work with him to build and scale this company, and eventually he wanted to sell the company. And so the valuation of the company when he came to me was somewhere around $3 million. It was a good company, but there were some challenges. He didn't have professional management in place. One of the family members was a CFO. He didn't have a great accountant. Most importantly for you entrepreneurs out there, he didn't have an exit strategy. He didn't know who he was going to sell to, what that needed to look like. And I could tell you, the most important thing, and a lot of people don't get this, when you are starting your business, is having an exit strategy, starting with the end in mind, understanding who you're going to sell to. I'll tell you, all the best technology companies, if they're starting up today, a lot of them know, hey, I'm building this to sell to Google, or I'm building this to sell to Amazon. And so when I asked him what his exit strategy was, he didn't know. So what we started doing, here's another lesson for you guys, is I started looking at, just like we talked about for Mo, the private equity companies. Private equity companies that were doing deals, buying healthcare related companies that looked just like his. Why? Well, that's where the money is. And if that's who you're going to sell to, you want to understand what they're interested in buying. So I started analyzing a lot of those deals, and I found out that there was some technology that he was missing. There were some people that were missing that needed to be put in place. There were states that he could be in doing the exact same thing that would allow him to exponentially increase his earnings. And so what we did was we redesigned some of the business. We put scalable technology in place. We put some professional management in place. And we started on a very aggressive expansion. And what we were able to do with this company over a 4-year period is take it from just under a $4 million valuation to where he was able to exit to a private equity company at $165 million. This is a pretty rare story. He was able to do this without any other shareholders. He was 100% owner. Because this was long-term capital gains, he still netted over $130 million. That's about $7.5 million a year in passive income. And I already told you, $1 million to $2 million is pretty nice lifestyle. So you got $130 million and you're reinvesting another $40 million during that period of time. He was 41, I believe, when he sold this. This is a guy that will have $1 billion by the time he dies. This is a guy who will have generational wealth. This is a guy who didn't do anything special. He got the right advice. He acted. He had discipline. He invested in himself. This is somebody who will more than likely enter that other 3,000 people that I talked about that are billionaires. This is somebody that if you believe you can be, if you get the right tools, you get the right knowledge, you get yourself on the roadmap, you can be there too. So Jack, guys, the entrepreneur who built this from scratch, who bootstrapped it, had the biggest equity. Yes, he took the biggest risk, but he took a very calculated risk. And what I'm going to tell you next is how to take that calculated risk, what that looks like, and how to put yourself on a path to also having generational wealth. I'm going to do another episode where I get into the details of what did I do for Jack to exactly build, scale, exit, sell his business. That's an episode in itself. But let me give you guys some parameters. Because again, the idea here is understanding the path of which you need to create generational wealth is only going to come through equity unless you're good at dunking a basketball or throwing a football. That's going to be your path to get there. So what you have to do, I talked about this before, you got to reverse engineer things. You got to work from right to left. You have to start with the end in mind. And so if you're trying to build generational wealth, you got to figure out what is that number? What do you need? If I'm going to build a business, how much am I going to be able to sell that for? And so I'm going to give you a few simple basics so you understand what you're building, how it's going to be valued. So I'm going to break it down into a couple of different companies. You got your service companies, your consulting companies, your trade type of companies, those companies that are a little bit more, let's call it normalized, standard, your standard level of growth. Those are going to sell based off of something called EBITDA, which is basically just the earnings. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That is the money that you keep after all those expenses. And when you're selling the company, what are you selling? Well, you're selling a steady stream of income that somebody is buying, and they're going to pay you what's called a multiple on that. The multiple is going to be the amount of money off the earnings. So at the end of the year, let's just say you earn $1 million. On those standard companies, the EBIT multiple is somewhere between 6 to 10. So for every $1 million you make, you're going to get somewhere between $6 million and $10 million on that sale. Okay. The difference between 6 to 10 million, we'll get in that, but you can imagine. What I always tell my clients is if you're looking to build a business, you want your business to look as much like Microsoft Office 365 as possible. What do I mean by that? Well, anyone in business has Outlook, Word, Excel. We all pay for it. Ask me, we have tons of our employees. I don't even know how much we pay for it. Why? Because you just pay for it. It's something you need to do business. And so if you were to buy Microsoft 365, it's pretty hard to screw that one up. Where the corollary, if you had Joe's technology shop and Joe was the guy who came out and fixed your computer. Joe was the guy who programmed and everything. And Joe was the only operator. Well, what would happen to that business if Joe got hit by a bus? Well, it probably wouldn't be worth that much. And those are a couple of extremes, but those are the differences I see in real time between getting a low multiple and a high multiple on your company. Now, if you are a tech company, if you're a subscription company, if you're like that Microsoft 365 that they call software as a service, those companies, because a lot of times, like Amazon wasn't profitable for over a decade, they're going to trade off something called ARR. What ARR stands for is annual reoccurring revenue. That means is how much money does this company make? So what is the top line? If you have revenue, let's say $1 million, the ARR is typically going to be somewhere between 5 to 8. So if you have $1 million in revenue, not earnings, you might have zero earnings, your company would be selling between 5 to $8 million. And so if you're looking to, let's say, build a $45 million company, with those ranges of, let's say, $5 million to $8 million in EBITDA, or $8 million to $12 million in ARR, you'd be somewhere in the EBIT range of between $35 and $70 million exit. And on the ARR, you'd be between a $40 to $80 million exit. I know that's a lot, but it's really not that difficult. If you've got a business that's a more traditional business, HVAC, landscaping, financial services, late stage, typically that's going to be EBITDA, your earnings, how much money are you making at the end of the year. Then you're going to put somewhere between a 6 to 10 multiple on that. If you're a startup, fast growing, cybersecurity, software as a service business, that's going to be how much revenue are you generating? And that's going to be somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 times. Putting this all together, what we're going to do next is give you an example. You guys that are entrepreneurs come to me all the time. 35-year-old guy, and it's different things. Landscaping company, commercial landscaping, doctors, dentists, whatever it is, what they're looking to do is exactly what we talked about. Build enterprise value in their business, an asset that they can sell for several millions of dollars that they can then take that money, put it in an investment portfolio, create passive income, and build generational wealth off of that money. Let me repeat that. What everyone's trying to do is build a business that creates value that can later be sold for millions of dollars, that comes to you in the form of a check. We then put that to an investment portfolio. It supports your lifestyle and continues to grow a big lump sum amount of generational wealth for your family. Now, if you came to me and you were 35, let's use a $45 million exit. Okay, what does a $45 million exit need to look like? Let's go back to what we talked about before. If it's a software company, something that's fast growing, that's going to be somewhere around a $4.5 million revenue stream. So that means you need to get your revenue, your gross receipts, your customers that are paying for this service up to about $4.5 million. If you can do that based off of the multiple of a fast growing company that's based off of ARR, that will get you to 45 million bucks. If you're someone who says, yeah, I've got this commercial landscaping company, I've got a financial services company, a little more traditional, a little less scalable, then we're going to be looking at earnings, EBITDA, and that earnings is going to need to be about $5 million. So a $45 million exit for a software company, you need to get your revenue to $4.5 million. For a more traditional company, you need to get your earnings to $5 million. Now, when we do that, and let's use a 10-year period of time, because I think when you have the right guidance, you have the right expertise, and you put the right systems in place, those numbers that I just talked about, I've seen done numerous times. So I know this is obtainable. Well, what does that mean on exit, and how does that build generational wealth, Rob? Okay, I said a 35-year-old. He exits at 45 million. What does he keep off of that? It's somewhere around $37 million because you're going to pay capital gains taxes on that. And when you think about that, again, when we put that into a portfolio at around a 5% distribution, what amount of money can we pull out and live a life off of? Well, it's about $1.35 million, or after taxes, that's back to that $1 million number. So again, the work that we did, now at 45, we don't have to work anymore, and we have spendable after tax $1 million, which we already agreed on is a pretty good quality of life. Now, what happens to the rest of that money? Well, if you invest it properly, now we're going to talk about this in another episode of how do you invest $35 million. But what I can tell you is a well-diversified portfolio of alternative investments, traditional investments over a long period of time should be able to get you about 11% per year. But also, let's remember, when you start out at 45, that 1.35 million, 1 million spendable, that's great at 45, but what about the I word? Inflation. Yeah, you're going to have inflation. So we know in 10 years, we're going to need to have 1.7 million. In 20 years, we're going to need to have 2.2 million. So the amount of money that we have to take out of that portfolio is going to continue to go up. This is one thing that people overlook. But if we sell at 45 million and we take 1.35 million out and we earn 11% and we increase that take-home income by 2.5% per year, and we live, unfortunately not forever, guys, to where a lot of people, hopefully now with AI, are going to be living a lot longer. Let's say age 85 for a male. Well, what does that look like? Well, obviously, you took a lot of money out of that portfolio. You worked really hard for 10 years of your life to build that equity. You put it in investments that were managed the right way. You got 11%. At age 85, when you die, you will have $1.1 billion. And this is the way, guys, that the billionaires that I work with did it. When you talk about the multi-billionaires out there, sometimes they started with a bigger amount from the second generation. But this is a path as an entrepreneur that I think if you hear this and you're not excited about this, if you hear this and you don't tell your kids, hey, look, guys, Rob said we need to go out and build a business that can earn $4 million a year. Or, hey, we're pretty good at technology and we got a great idea. We need to get something that can generate $5 million in revenue. And we've got a decade to do that. Do you think the education that you get, the way you think, the people that you surround yourself with, the focus that you're going to have is way different than a 9-to-5er? Showing up, collecting whatever's handed to you. Do you think the skill set that you need to possess, do you think the information that you're paying for is going to be different? When I learned this information, guys, it was just like a shock. And I just slapped myself because, like, why didn't I learn this earlier? Why was I so worried about growing everyone's money and protecting their money? Why didn't I understand that equity was the key? And I'll tell you, myself, I told a lot of people the last time I made my first $1 million at 30. But I wasn't a multi-millionaire in terms of net worth until I sold my first business. And when I sold my first business, the money that came into my account was life-changing. I started 2 additional businesses that were valued more than that in a record amount of time. Why? Because I learned this lesson after 20 years. And what I'm telling you, and I want to shout it from the rooftops, guys, stop believing the crap that people are telling you. Stop believing that you're going to cryptocurrency or a real estate invest your way to hundreds of millions of dollars. You won't do it. I told you that over 25 years of working with the world's wealthiest people, I pointed out people that are worth $100 billion. All of them did it through equity. So give up all the other ideas of how you're going to build generational wealth. Start thinking about, how do I become Manny? How do I become Mo? Or anyone, I believe, how do I become Jack? Because the truth is, you can be a landscaper. You can be an HVAC person. You can be a pest control person. I had a client who sold pallets. You know what pallets are? They're those wooden things that stack up things at Costco that they put their forks in. He sold those. You know who his biggest client became? And this was an immigrant that came from Mexico at 18 years of age. He sold his business for over $100 million. You know who his biggest client was? It's a company called Home Depot. And he did it. Barely spoke English, had a 6th grade education, but he understood this. He understood the value of his time. He understood the value. If I understand ARR, if I understand EBIT, if I get out there and bust my ass, I invest in myself, I can put myself on a path to prosperity. I could create generational wealth. I can change people's lives. So it's up to you. You can continue to look for the next moonshot cryptocurrency. You can continue to look for the next get-rich-quick scam. You can continue to waste your time chasing rainbows, or you can understand and listen to someone who has built generational wealth himself, not where I want to be yet, but guess what? Everything I just told you, I spent every day doing. Why am I doing this podcast? Very simply. The people that I'm talking about building generational wealth are my clients. I want more of those people to come to me. I don't do anything by chance, and you shouldn't either. And so if you get one lesson out of this podcast is you need to build equity. You need to make yourself more valuable to become Manny or Mo, or you need to invest in yourself to learn the roadmap of how do I get to 4.5 million in ARR and turn that into a $45 million exit, or how do I get to 5 million in EBIT and turn that into a $45 million exit? How do I retire a billionaire? And even if you don't, guys, isn't that what you should be shooting for? $1 billion? I told you it's the same roadmap. And what if you get to 100 million? Or what if you get to 50 million? Or what if you get to 40 million? I promise you that is a greater path than what you're on today. It's a greater path than the mediocrity that you told you should settle for. It's a greater path than what they're teaching us in our school systems today. It's a greater path than what most of us believe in our heads that we can obtain. But I'm telling you, whether it's my client who came from Mexico and built a pallet company, whether it's my other client who is, yes, educated in healthcare and built a healthcare company, whether another client I had with another person, 9th grade education, who built a multi-million-dollar pest control company spraying bugs, this is how you create generational wealth. You first create a business. You create excess cash flow to live off of. You invest that cash flow. And while you're doing that, you are building enterprise value for an eventual exit to private equity, to strategic investors, to going public. And that exit becomes a life-changing event. I told you in the first episode, we're going to get you rich. We got you there. Now I'm telling you, it's a different way to think, but this is how you get wealthy. I promise you, if there was another way to do it, a faster way, an easier way, a stock tip, a crypto tip that I can give you, I would do it. But the truth is it needs to come from equity. And the truth is it starts with a couple of things. Number one is investing in yourself. Number two is believing that you can do it. And then the third and fourth thing are this. You need to get out there and start building the right relationships, because when you invest in yourself and you become excellent, if no one opens doors for you, if you're not getting the right information, good luck. The company I told you about, the pallet company, it was a relationship that got him into Home Depot. It was a relationship through Manny, through me, who told him, no, don't go work at Disney, go and work at CrowdStrike. And then what you need to do with that expertise and relationships is bust your ass and execute day after day after day. And if I promise you, if you do these things, and the sooner you do them like Manny or this 35-year-old, the better. If you're 70 or 80 years old, teach this to your kids, teach this to your grandkids, because the magnitude of which this information will change their lives is tremendous. And so I thank you guys. And look, if you liked this show, if you liked the last show, I promise you there is more information to come where we're going to break down how to invest a $35 million portfolio step by step. How do I build this $45 million exit? All those things are coming, but I need you to do one thing. I need you to first subscribe to the channel. And then secondarily, please, 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 on this episode, I beg you, share this with the youngest person who can obtain this information possible. My daughter, who is now a senior in high school, is going into college, has this information. I'm guiding her. I got this information when I was 40, way too late, and I still did pretty good with it. I hope you guys like this episode. Stay tuned, way more to come. Like, subscribe, click that bell, share it with a friend. Thanks for watching this episode of The American Capitalist.